Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 51 for Thursday, December 11th. My name is Farbod Merkazi, here as always with Jace Hatfield. Jace, I thought today's show, with it being in between Conference Championship week last week and the playoffs starting next Friday, would be kind of like, you remember those choose your own adventure books where like
I
you
love
read a
those
page,
books.
those were great, but you read a page and it goes like, if you want this to happen, go to page 48. If you want this to happen, go to page 22. Well, we had a show lined up where it kind of would have allowed us to go on a choose your own adventure. There was no games that was going to structure our show. Like we love the season, the podcast in season. It's so much fun to talk about games. But we also were looking forward to like having maybe talking about recruiting, talking about the aspects of the sport that we haven't talked about much on the show itself. But within the last 6 hours and within the last 48 hours, college football cycle just doesn't stop. The Michigan fired Sherrone Moore, Notre Dame's AD Pete Bevacqua. I try to say that 10 times fast. He went on an all-time historic rant. And then obviously we didn't get into it. This happened last Friday, but we're going to have to talk about Matt Campbell getting hired at Penn State. One thing we're going to do our own choose your own adventure. We're going to do a little bit of a transfer portal check. And the transfer portal officially opens January 2nd. We have a lot of players already announcing that they're going to enter or already entered. So we're going to dive right into that. Talk about who you could be on the lookout for your favorite team. I mean, Jace, I'm excited for this show, but it's nothing like what our rundown looked like 7 hours ago.
Yeah, this felt like one of our. It wasn't that it was last minute in the sense that we're not preparing for it, but the actual topics came together like this afternoon, which I feel like normally we have a pretty good of idea of it earlier in the week. That gives us time to research and all that. This was pretty last minute, which was kind of fun. I know you've got the long car ride home from work where you can just like whir the brain, listen to podcasts, things like that. So I'm excited. We haven't really talked much about the Sherrone Moore stuff. We've kind of saved the Matt Campbell conversations for today. Not only like are we obviously speaking on the pod and to our listeners, but kind of to each other. I know where we stand on most things by the time we hit record. This is an episode where that's not entirely true today.
No, this hasn't been for us personally off pod a voice memo text back and forth week about everything. We've been both so busy. We've just been texting links of like news, like what the hell? How's this happening? I mean, today at work, we're recording this obviously the day before the show's released. Today at work, I was deep into whatever I was working on, and one of my coworkers way down the hall goes, "Michigan fires head coach." I'm like, what? There's no way. And then obviously everything that's come out since. We're going to get into all that in about 2 minutes. Make sure you are subscribed to us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion spelled out. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at F4Discussion and on TikTok at Flag the number 4 Discussion. Bit of housekeeping before we get officially started. We tweeted out yesterday on Tuesday a Flag for Discussion bracket challenge and a Flag for Discussion Bowl Mania challenge. Free to enter, free to join. If you want the link, check out our Twitter at F4Discussion. The more the merrier. We want this to be massive eventually, and we're going to keep doing this year after year as long as there's a college football playoff to talk about. Of course, we don't know where this sport is heading.
Yeah, send it to your friends. Send it to any family members, anybody you know interested in college football. We'd love to have them in there, and if they want to listen to the pod, even better. But if not, it's just fun. We have like over a dozen entrants in the bracket pool. The bracket pool, I figured, is a little bit more laid back, so it's a little bit easier for everybody to get involved in. And it's just easy. You just pick a team. We have a lot of people in there. It's kind of exciting just to see all the people that listen and follow along and want to be a part of that journey. And then the Bowl Mania, that's a little bit more for the college football sickos, the nuts, the people who are ready to figure out their confidence rating on Washington, Boise State in the Holiday Bowl or whatever they're playing in, if that's what it is. That one, if you're a true nut, you might find a little bit more solace in. But that's like the confidence rating of, I think you have to pick the hypothetical playoff matchups too. So
yeah,
I think it's like 48. Like your confidence is like 1 through 48. So that one's a little bit more intense, but definitely the bracket pool. Send it to the family, send it to the fiance, the spouse, the significant other. Have some fun with that one.
Both links to both of those challenges are once again on our Twitter, F4 discussion. It should be one of our most recent tweets, if not the most recent. All right. Housekeeping out of the way, Jace. About 4 or 5 hours ago at the time of recording, Michigan fired head coach Sherrone Moore with cause. I'm going to try to just stay away from all the things we're reading online because a lot of things are done by Reddit users, message board people, and Twitter people. In general, I want to stay away from that. I want to talk about Michigan. I want to talk about Sherrone Moore's tenure there. I want to talk about what they do next. But just to cozy it up from here, within Sherrone Moore's contract, Michigan has the right to fire him if conduct by the head coach, which offends against public decency or morality, as shall be determined by standards prevailing in the community, or which results in or in the reasonable determination of the university, could result in material injury to the reputation, interests, or obligations of the university or the program. Basically, Michigan has the right within his contract to fire him. And like I said, the reasonings behind it, all of it as of right now is not official. It's speculation, but a lot of it is, at least the rumblings have been out there. Right? I've listened to, you mentioned my long drive. I've listened to Andy and Ari reacting to it. I've listened to Josh Pate reacting to it. I've seen people tweeting about it, talking about it, posting Twitter videos about it. And the general conversation is this was known within the college football community for weeks now. And Michigan obviously had to conduct an internal investigation, but Michigan wasn't just blindsiding themselves with this decision. This was almost planned, almost possibly. Like I've heard people say, why would they do it after signing day? It's terrible. And I've heard other people say it's purposeful that they did it after signing day. Here's word manual, the Michigan AD's official statement on the firing. Head football coach Sherrone Moore has been terminated with cause, effective immediately following a university investigation. Credible evidence was found that Coach Moore engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. This conduct constitutes a clear violation of university policy and maintains zero tolerance for such behavior. All right. That whole spiel is over. Now, where do you want to start in this drama?
Maybe the easiest segue is who's next on the list for Michigan head coach, because it's a program that won a national championship, 2 seasons ago now?
Yeah, wait.
Fresh off of that.
Let's do the autopsy. Let's do the autopsy on Michigan, Sherrone Moore's Michigan tenure first before we talk about what's next for Michigan itself. It's a program that when he was hired, they were going through their own scandal. And Sherrone Moore was actually at the center of that. He had admitted to deleting text messages before handing his phone over to the FBI. It's a program who lost their head coach, national championship winning head coach, in the midst of a scandal, who went to the NFL to take a head coaching job there. It's a program that basically looked at hiring Sherrone Moore as not a slam dunk home run hire, but maybe this will get us through the scandals. And then if he's great, we'll keep him. If not, we won't. This is also a hire that I think I read a tweet off to you 2 shows ago or 3 shows ago. That was, the tweet said, if Michigan were open right now, it would be a top 5, top 3 opening. And if Sherrone Moore was on the open market right now, he would not get one of those jobs. So all of that's real. And on the autopsy itself, I think they did some good things there. But in general, I told you a couple shows ago that the fact that they went into last season, not this season, last season, thinking they had the quarterbacks in-house to win was already an indictment on the brain power and football knowledge of that staff, because they didn't. They couldn't throw the forward pass. And then they go and spend an egregious amount of money on Bryce Underwood, which could end up paying out. He's a true freshman. We'll see how he develops. And just an egregious amount of money, hoping that that's going to solve their issues. But like, I'm never a fan of hiring the interim coach. We've covered that whole era. I don't know. I think they were good. I don't think they were ever Michigan special good.
Yeah, he didn't look like he was going to take them to any level we haven't seen before. He looked like their ceiling was just trying to redo 2023, where you're just hard-nosed, physical, best offensive line in the country, best defensive line in the country. and win that way. It felt like he was just going to try to rebuild that, which it worked out for them in 2023. But I don't know if that's necessarily a repeatable, reliable strategy. It is very difficult to recruit and develop that much talent on both sides of the line of scrimmage and then keep them all healthy for an entire season. Plus, on top of that, there's obviously who knows how much the cheating impacted or didn't impact the games and whatnot. But it looked like he was just kind of trying to recreate that, and I'm not sure it was a story that was going to be successful. And in terms of what does this mean with Michigan record-wise moving forward, I actually don't think this is like the worst thing in the world long term for them as a program, which is crazy to say. Obviously, short term, it looks terrible, and this could have some impact on recruiting and transfer portal stuff. We'll have to see who they hire next. That's probably like where I first go, though, is I'm like, you hate to, it's a crazy story and it's very dramatic, and we don't know all the bits and pieces, but depending on how things go, you want, there's victims of this, his family, you feel terrible for his family, his wife and his kids. You hope everything pans out for him. And so it kind of feels weird to move on and talk about the football aspect sometimes when there are people whose lives are being drastically changed. But that's, college football doesn't stop moving. Like, what the problem is like, they're going to have to call Bryce Underwood tonight and try to make sure he's staying at Michigan, like wearing a Wolverine jersey because the portal's coming up. So, we'll talk about that. And I actually think they aren't in a terrible spot with him gone. They've recruited really well. Yeah. And to the point you mentioned, signing day just happened. The big question is going to be, did they drag this on? So signing day happened, and then that's a whole nother story. There's also yet to find credible evidence. So it's not like they were sitting on this evidence, I'm sure, for a long time. Like I'm sure they just kind of finally put it all together, because if they try to fire him, they didn't have credible evidence. Now they're open to a lawsuit. So we'll see what happened there. We haven't heard anything by the time of this recording about recruits, transfer portal kids. Maybe we see a JKS situation where they have a bunch of freshmen who just committed who flip in the portal, come January. It feels wrong to ask you quite like I want to ask you the question, like, which head coaches do you foresee with Michigan have their eyes on? But it feels weird to start talking about, the future, but I think you kind of have to at some point, right?
Right. Okay. So how about this? Let's put a pin on the personal side, and then let's put a cap on that, and then we'll get into the football side. I think
good call.
Whatever allegations are out there that we've read on Twitter, on Reddit, on message boards, however true they might be, they are allegations. So I prefer just to stay away from that. What I do know is that Sherrone Moore was fired for cause because of an inappropriate relationship. So what we also know that's been reported as of like 10 minutes ago is that Sherrone Moore was detained by the Ann Arbor police after his dismissal. So I shared it with you before the show. I feel for the victims. I feel for the family who are the victims. I feel for them first and foremost. I feel for the staffers of Michigan football who now, I'm not talking about the defensive coordinator who was making $1 million a year. I'm talking about the other assistants that were making $50,000 who it's already hard enough to get a job in college football. And now because they're going to have to go get a new head coach and probably want to wipe out a lot of the building that's had 2 scandals in the last 4 years, they're going to lose their job. If you feel for them, you feel for the families. And in a weird sense, you still, like, I feel weird saying this, but I hope Sherrone Moore figures it out, like whatever, like accepts his mistakes and gets on the road to understanding why he made those mistakes and try to use his life experience to make sure other people around him don't make those mistakes and becomes a positive influence for them. So that's how I feel about that side of it. I'm not sure if you had any thoughts.
No, I agree with everything you said. I think that's my cap too. I feel the exact same way as you. We'll see more of that comes across. All right, we're going to put the cap on that one. Let's move forward. This is a premier program in the country. It's a program that, over the last couple of years has recruited really well. I think they finished with the 11th recruiting class in this past cycle, according to 24/7 Sports. 2 5-stars, a dozen 4-stars, and 3 stars to fill in the rest. But they've had a very successful recruiting cycle, and they had a successful recruiting cycle last year with Sherrone Moore as well. you have to wonder, a lot of kids will commit based on like relationships with coaches. Is it Sherrone Moore that relationship was with? Is it with other coordinators or people that are going to stick around the Michigan program? That's what's going to drive these, who's transferring, who's staying. And that's going to be the damage control that the staffers that stay on at Michigan, that they're going to have to do before they get a head coach for the next week, 2 weeks, day. Hell, there's a chance that the second we end recording this, Michigan just announces a new head coach. So, but that's the work that these people are going to have to start doing all night. Yeah, I think tomorrow by this time we'll have an answer.
If not Friday. So on your point, this is a premier program. I think if Michigan was open at the same time LSU, Florida, Penn State were open, I think the top program openings at that time would have probably been LSU and then Michigan. I think Florida's a big job, but just in the sense of where the program is, it's also in the Big Ten. The right guy can do a lot of great things. And one thing I've heard talked about a lot today, since in the aftermath, is this is a job that Matt Campbell would have been perfect for. But he left Iowa State after 11 years, 1 week too early. But, okay, so the Michigan side of things, I personally believe, you brought up Bryce Underwood. I wouldn't be shocked. Like Michigan, the people who are running them, the staffers, the donors, the boosters, Larry Ellison, they're not dumb people. I would be shocked if Bryce Underwood's contract didn't tie him to Michigan, not Sherrone Moore. I would be shocked if Bryce Underwood, if like he's the least of their concerns of transferring out, because they know that he's tied there, or he has to pay back a significant amount of money or give up a significant amount of money. Maybe that is the case. Maybe he transfers out tomorrow. Who knows? But I would be shocked if Bryce Underwood is the first person in the portal. The second thing is, I think they did this after signing day for a reason. This isn't your grandpa's signing day where these guys can ask for releases of their NLI right away. I mean, they can. We saw JKS do that last year with Oregon. He asked for his release of NLI after having like 4 bowl practices, and he went to Cal. With that said, a lot of these guys, especially going to a place like Michigan or in Oregon or in Alabama, those guys have NIL contracts. I would imagine a lot of those guys are sticking around, or at least they committed and signed with Michigan for Michigan, less than Sherrone Moore. Michigan's one of those programs that they don't lose recruits because of a coach leaving, unless it was a legendary coach. I think the program and the brand is bigger than the coach itself. So that's, I don't know where you lie. I'm less afraid of a mass exodus happening in Ann Arbor, because I don't think that's going to happen. I think in general, by Thursday or Friday, Michigan's probably going to announce their next head coach. I know investigations happen and weirdly on weird timelines. I know that maybe the evidence came down this morning and they fired him this evening. With that said, man, if they had this evidence through signing day, maybe they did. I can't say that they did. But if they had it, I would be shocked if they haven't been doing work behind the scenes through back channels, talking to potential candidates.
I definitely think they've, probably done their best to put effort into contracts that make them tied to Michigan. But at the end of the day, with how little regulations are around NIL money and how rich these other, for maybe Bryce Underwood has to pay Michigan back a certain amount of the NIL money he took from them, LSU is going to cough that up. Now, like these other programs have so much money too that I don't think the contract is a huge worry for a lot of these kids. I have to imagine they've already, hundreds of athletes have probably already violated these contracts. And also I have to imagine, for as smart as Larry Ellison might be, Bryce Underwood's got an agent who's probably equally as, crafty, and probably put language in there that if a coaching change happens, he gets out and that kind of thing. So I'm sure it's pretty equal as a full. I was reading after the firing that there was a few key players that Michigan had, young players. So it was Jordan Marshall, Jordan Marshall, Andrew Marsh, and Bryce Underwood on the offensive side. Had Andrew Marsh being true freshman wide receiver, top 100 recruit last year, started to put on some production towards the end of the year. And then obviously Bryce Underwood, Jordan Marshall, sophomore running back who emerged onto the scene with Justice Haynes being injured. There were some rumors that the three of them were kind of in this together in terms of, are we going to go or stay? And if it's one, it's all. If it's not, or it's none of them. So I think that'll be interesting to track. And my guess is that's entirely coaching dependent. I think the Bryce Underwood transferring conversation started long before the Sherrone Moore firing. And everyone kind of pointed to, it's the development that we didn't see out of Bryce that was concerning to a lot of people. And it was is there anyone in place at Michigan that makes Bryce feel like he's going to get developed beyond what he had done this year? Because I think a lot of people don't want to call him a bust because of he's young and he shows potential. But if we're being honest, he was a bad quarterback this year. Like in terms of Power 4 starting QBs, he was one of the worst in terms of his performance in the 2025 season. He had more turnovers than touchdowns. He struggled. And I think you look at what Lane Kiffin did at LSU with Trinidad Chambliss, a Division II kid. He turned Trinidad from a kid that 99.9% of the country had never heard about into someone who's now going to get drafted and had Heisman odds for most of the season. If you're Bryce, how do you watch that and say, wow, Nussmeier's gone at LSU, that job's open, I was committed there originally, they have a much better repertoire of quarterbacks in the NFL. So there was already movement towards that, and I think this might just expedite that decision or make it obviously feel much more do or die. But I think it depends on the coach that gets hired, because if they get DeBoer, then you say, okay, look, we got a guy that's going to pass. He's going to throw the football a lot, and he's developed, quarterbacks in the past that play in the NFL. So that'll change things, and maybe for the better for Michigan. We'll see.
You make a great point. In today's college football, I wouldn't put anything past anybody. Bryce Underwood maybe could transfer tomorrow. I'm just assuming maybe my hopes for the sport and the people in charge are too high, but I'm just assuming that somebody who wrote that contract on Michigan's side, I know that Bryce would have an agent, but the money being so high, Michigan had to have some leverage or negotiating ability of saying, okay, you're locked in for 3 years or 2 years. And that's locked in with Michigan, not locked in with the coach. That's one thing. I mean, you brought up DeBoer. I think you make, in terms of candidates, and On3 has come out with their hot board for who the next Michigan head coach is going to be. We can go down. You wrote down some people on our doc, and I have the On3 one on my left as well. The first person you call is Kalen DeBoer, and make him say no. And Kalen DeBoer, he's gone through a ton of backlash with Alabama. And by the way, no sympathy. You sign up for going to a program with that much history of success, replacing the guy you did. It happens. And I think Kalen's also the alpha type guy who understands that. With that said, right before Jim Harbaugh left Michigan for the Chargers, Nick Saban retired. The conversation at that point was, well, if Michigan opens, Kalen DeBoer, the Washington head coach, would have interest in the Michigan job. His general manager, Courtney Morgan, at Alabama, he was his general manager at Washington. He was his general manager at Fresno State. In between those stops, he was at Michigan for a year as the general manager. So he can tell him what Michigan's all about. That would be closer to Kalen DeBoer's home. And Kalen DeBoer is an excellent head football coach with a history of winning. And I mean, he lost to Michigan in the national title game. But obviously that gets complicated with the fact that Kalen DeBoer is playing in a playoff game next Friday, and I think Michigan wants to have their coach earlier than that. With that said, there's other guys. I mean, On3 has Lincoln Riley listed here, which you got to pay USC some money if you want to take him. I don't think Lincoln Riley's done enough at USC to warrant a Michigan job, but maybe the appeal at this point would be exactly the appeal he has going forward at USC. He has Chad Bowden as his GM. He has a system now that's bringing in really good recruits. And basically the goal is, all right, if I can get better body types, if I can bring in the recruits that we're bringing in now with the system we have, well, then I can let my offense do what we naturally do, and we can win a lot of games at Michigan. Maybe that's the plan. By the way, I remembered today that if Lincoln Riley does leave USC, the first call for them will be Kalen DeBoer as well, because who's USC's AD? It's the AD that hired Kalen DeBoer when he was at Washington. So it all goes back to Kalen DeBoer right now. Do you have there's different coaches. Do you have a guy that you think they should call?
Yes, I do. I'm going to start with Joe Brady is a name. Doesn't
Interesting.
necessarily have many Michigan ties himself, but he's got a lot of college football ties. He was the OC and passing game coordinator at LSU during their like Joe Burrow crazy year, and even the couple years before that, working through their ranks. He went to Carolina kind of famously during COVID, had like the 2020, 2021 seasons there. Wasn't great, but also fair to say maybe didn't have the pieces in place to be great. Then he's been the Bills OC since then. And obviously we know how their offense has been. He's one of those coaches that he's been in the NFL as a coordinator now for 4 years. And he's always been linked to these college jobs, but has never really taken them. I think it's going to take like a big number and a big job, but he's young, offensive minded. And I think the reason why I like him for Michigan is he's tough nosed. He likes offensive lines and he likes to establish the run. Like, I love the idea of Kalen DeBoer there, or Lincoln Riley would be fun, but I don't think DeBoer or Lincoln Riley run nearly enough of like a Michigan style of offense that the school and Manuel would be comfortable like completely. I think if Michigan had to watch their football team get killed in a game because their O-line stinks and they ran for -3 yards, their fan base and boosters would just cancel the program. Like I couldn't see a world where they let that happen. So I think Joe Brady is an offensive mind that still keeps that edge that reminds me of like a Michigan football team, which is, I think, is going to be important, which is interesting because there's not too many like defensive minded, tough nosed coaches at this point in just the coaching world. It's hard to find those. And Michigan's kind of like they ran through with Harbaugh, and I think he's probably never going to come back to the college ranks. Obviously, Sherrone Moore was like an O-line kind of guy, and that's not happening anymore. And then Jesse Minter's a name we've both heard on a few reports, but he's got a show cause. He was a part of the cheating scandal at Michigan, and then he had a recruiting violation as well. So he would have a show cause if he was to get signed. And I don't think they can wait till April to announce a head coach.
No,
for a million reasons.
It's important to know that show cause isn't for the cheating scandal. It's because he texted a recruit when he wasn't supposed to. It was like during one of those recruiting dark periods. So he texted a recruit and got a show cause until April. So yeah, you're right. They can't hire anyone until, if they were to hire Jesse Minter, they wouldn't be able to hire him until April, which no self-respecting Power 4 college football program would wait 3 months for any candidate. Doesn't matter who the candidate is, for any candidate. I think this is a tough situation for Michigan because obviously there's many reasons it's a tough situation. If this job was open 3 weeks ago, there would be more candidates. Not only have some candidates taken other jobs, head coaching jobs, but a lot of the top coordinators have taken head coaching jobs. A lot of the top coordinators have taken coordinating jobs at other places. Not that they can't be bought out or moved, but like we said, Matt Campbell took Penn State last week. Clark Lee, Vanderbilt signed an extension. He can be moved, but you're just going to have to pay more for him now. Jeff Brom signed an extension with Louisville. Brent Key signed an extension with Georgia Tech. Lane Kiffin obviously is already at LSU. Don Summerall went to Tulane. Went to Florida. So a lot of the quote-unquote top candidates from this cycle have already been poached. So now I think your option is doing what you said, is go outside of the box with like a coordinator, NFL type like Joe Brady. Or I think you're going to have to see if you can. The second person I'd call who I don't think would take it, but you have to make him say no, is Kenny Dillingham. And I think Kenny Dillingham would be an excellent head football coach at Michigan. I think he would make that program fun again. Something you like a lot, like, not that they haven't been fun, but they've been kind of boring. Like, and it's just been scandal after scandal. Kenny Dillingham is just fun. He's a good dude at heart. The only issue with him is he's home right now. And all he preaches, like, I'm next door neighbors with my sister, my high school coaches, my assistant coach, and he lives down the street with my best friends. Like, he has everything he wants, and all he wants is to build a sustainable winner at ASU. One thing I don't know, because I don't know the guy, is how much longer at ASU can you keep putting in 80% of effort to build a program you could probably build at Michigan with 80% effort? No disrespect to ASU, but we just saw Sam Levitt, who had injuries all year, basically announced he's entering the transfer portal because ASU probably won't have the finances to keep him. And ASU, Kenny's done a wonderful job taking over from a really hard situation from Herm Edwards. But how much longer is Kenny going to be able to sit there and be like, yeah, I'm just going to keep weathering the storm because this is home, versus I'm going to go to one of the best and most premier programs in the country and see what I can do there with the adequate resources, funding, and be able to really build something that can, like, ceiling can be national championship, whereas in ASU, the ceiling's probably a playoff win, unless they have a really special team.
Yeah. My last note on the Michigan coaching situation here. The one thing you want to stay away from, this is kind of foreshadowing of the conversation we'll have on this podcast. You want to avoid the Penn State scenario where I think you settle. You settle for a coach because you feel the pressure of needing one. We'll talk on that one here in a moment. If you're Michigan,
wow,
you have to avoid, I've heard people talk about Manny Diaz. I don't know if Manny Diaz is the coach that's going to take Michigan to where they can be and probably should be year in, year out. I think Michigan's going to be a program that's definitely feeling the pressure to make not a big hire, but just a hire. And if you're Michigan, I think you don't want to be. It makes me think of when you go back when they had the Rich Rod Brady Hoke era, those that decade of Michigan football when we were younger, where they were just terrible year in, year out. And they felt like they could just never figure out. They just kept firing and hiring coaches, trying to, as the saying goes, throw shit on a wall and see if it sticks. They felt like they just kept doing that. And at some point you're like, okay, take a deep breath, pause. Let's actually think about a hire instead of just panicking and hiring a guy that's willing to take this job. If you're Michigan, you do want to avoid that scenario. So I've heard people throw out Tommy Rees. I've heard people throw out Manny Diaz, even Jed Fish. No disrespect to those coaches. I don't think they're terrible coaches. I don't think that's the home run hire for Michigan or the hire that in 10 years we look back and say that was the hire. That's a hire where I think in 10 years you look back and you say kind of a whatever burger as a Michigan coach. So it's hard because given the timeline and how it all went down, it's not like Michigan's fault, but they do need a coach now. But I would do your due diligence, go after a big fish, not like a Jed Fish, big fish like Kalen DeBoer, and then maybe like a Joe Brady and Lincoln Riley, maybe even go for guys of that nature. And then if it's Saturday morning and you have nobody, okay, Manny Diaz, how are you doing? Jed Fish, any way we can get your family to move from Arizona, even though they just moved there, to Michigan, even though it's the polar opposite of climate. Make those calls Saturday for that desperate. He did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he worked under Harbaugh. Do you remember when Harbaugh had that interview with Jameis Winston asking about crab legs and sex?
Yes.
I think Jed Fish was in that video. He was the staffer with Harbaugh in that video. I will find that video and I will send it to you. I might be wrong, but I think he was in that video.
That's hilarious.
So there's another tangent I want to go down about Jed Fish, but there's two different types of coach buyouts. I agree with everything you said, but there's two different types of coach buyouts. One of them is what the school owes the coach if they were to fire him, and the other one is what another school would have to pay your school if they were to hire your coach. So they're different amounts that in contractual terms. Jed Fish actually has a pretty prohibitive buyout of $10 million. What helps Michigan in this case is that if and when Sherrone Moore's for-cause firing is finalized, obviously, I don't think Sherrone Moore is going to have much of a legal case to say this shouldn't be for cause. But if and when Sherrone Moore's firing for cause is finalized, they don't have to pay him a dime for firing him. So that does help Michigan. They can go pay a lot more. But Jed Fish's buyout is $10 million. That's one of the more prohibitive buyouts from asking another school to pay one school. Dan Lanning's is over $20 million. Those are amongst the most prohibitive ones. The coaches I know you can't go get are the Dan Lannings of the world, the Marcus Freemans of the world, the Kirby Smarts of the world, the ones that are so entrenched in a university that you don't think that they're going to go anywhere. Jed Fish, here's how I would actually tier my coaches. I think you make Kenny Dillingham. I think you would make Kalen DeBoer say no. I think you make Kenny Dillingham say no. Clark Lee, he just signed an extension with Vanderbilt, but he was reported to have interviewed with Penn State. He was rumored to have interviewed with Florida. You make him say no. And then if those don't work out, that's when you go, hey, Jed, want to come back to Ann Arbor? I know you hold this place in high esteem. That's when you go and maybe look at a coordinator. But I think at this point in time, they're going to want to poach a sitting head football coach from probably the college ranks. Yeah, that's overall what I feel about this scenario. The tangent I actually want to go down with you, and I know we should be moving on to the next topic. Jedd Fisch, would he be the Florida head coach today if he didn't take the Washington job? Remember, he's an alum of Florida. Well, he didn't play there, but he was an alumni there. Yeah. And he did some incredible stuff at Arizona. Really rebuilt a terrible situation. Was probably going to have his best year yet last year, keeping Fafita and McMillan. This year, I don't know if there would have been a drop-off. Maybe a down year. But if he didn't have to go through another 2-year rebuild at Washington, would he be the Florida head coach?
I think the answer is yes in two. I'm going to add a quick hypothetical to give two yeses. One of them is if Florida had done the right thing and fired Billy Napier earlier, then yes, I think he would be the head coach at Florida. Had like the same cycle where he went to Washington, had Florida opened up, I think he goes to Florida over Washington for sure. Or the other scenario, he just doesn't leave Arizona and he would, like, let's say he was still at Arizona and they're still successful and like this cycle opened up, then yeah, I think he would be at Florida as well. Yeah. I also could see on the Jedd Fisch tangent, because this is all kind of fun to talk about now. If Jedd Fisch takes the Michigan job, let's say that happens, does Kalen DeBoer go back to Washington? Let's say Alabama gets smoked round one, Oklahoma wins 30-10, -10 rushing yards for Alabama. Does he then go back to Washington and say, screw it, I'm going back to my corner where it worked out?
No, I think he waits until Alabama pays him a buyout and
that's true.
He'll take a year off and come back to next year or 2 years from now when other jobs open. I seriously think Kalen DeBoer would. I don't think Kalen DeBoer would leave Alabama, but if he does leave anywhere, it's for either USC to go back to coaching for AD Jen Cohen, or it's for Michigan, which he was rumored to have had interest when he went to Washington. I think he probably loved Washington, probably loved Seattle. I don't think you can go back and heal the wounds of your departure as easily as people think, unless he goes back and wins right away again, which he very well could.
If/when he does leave Alabama, how quickly until we get the first at Nick Saban how's retirement tweet? 2 seconds?
Dude,
0.1 second?
There's no doubt in my mind. Actually, yeah, you're probably right. Here's a better question. Michigan needs Kalen DeBoer to announce it this week. Scenario. Michigan needs Kalen DeBoer to announce it this week. Kalen DeBoer has accepted it, but he said, hey, guys, I have a playoff game next week. I have to coach. Let's say Michigan needs him to announce it this week because they want to do it as soon as possible. They do it. Alabama pulls an Ole Miss and says, bro, you're not going to coach our team in the playoff and go be the head coach somewhere else. Is Nick Saban the interim head coach?
He could be, and you know what? They would probably win at least one game if he did. I think he beats Venables.
It would be like a Bob Stoops situation or a Bob Stoops situation taking Oklahoma after Lincoln left for USC. But it would be in the playoff, which is why I don't think it's going to happen. I cannot imagine any universe that the Alabama head football coach leaves his team before a playoff game. I just cannot imagine in any universe that happens. But Michigan's going to try to make him say no. That's how I think. Man, I want to see that scenario now. I want to see Nick Saban come back because he's like the godfather and like savior.
You heard it here first, audience, before we move to our next topic. If Nick Saban coaches at Alabama for a playoff game, Flag for Discussion was the first one to figure out the chain of events that needs to happen for that to happen. So it's been spoken into existence. You heard it here first. There is a chance that Nick Saban coaches a playoff football game this year. You never know. It's college football, man. Crazier shit has happened.
Oh, yeah. In terms of that, Nick Saban likely won't be in the playoff this year unless that happens. Another team that won't be in the playoff this year, Notre Dame. Now, we had a really long conversation, unless you had anything else on Michigan, but I think we've capped that off. That was beautiful. Notre Dame, we had a long conversation about Notre Dame Sunday, or for our championship recap show, a Selection Sunday show. And you and I seem to be on pretty similar boats here. But one guy who doesn't seem to know how to read the room is Notre Dame AD Pete Bevacqua. He went on just an all-time media tour this week. He went on Dan Patrick's show, a bunch of other shows, podcasts. He had his own press conference. And I'm not going to read every quote he said, but on the Dan Patrick show, he said, "We were mystified by the actions of the conference, the ACC, to attack their biggest business partner in football and a member and a member of their conference in 24 of our other sports." And I would tell you, Dan, I wouldn't be honest with you if I didn't say that they have certainly done permanent damage to the relationship of the ACC and Notre Dame. Just, we didn't appreciate the fact that we were singled out repeatedly and compared to Miami. Not by Miami. Miami has every right to do that, but it raised a lot of eyebrows here that the conference was taking shots at us, and that's just not something we chose to do. We wouldn't choose to do that in the future, and people might disagree with us, but that's just not something we'd be comfortable saying. There's so much that he said that it's hard to wrap your brain around. I have a lot to say about it. I want to let you start.
Yeah.
Wait, did
I
you
don't
like
mind
what Pete Bevacqua said?
I don't mind it as a full. Here's the thing. I understand where he's coming from. It was a little weird when the ACC was fighting the Miami battle. But then take a step
But
back.
that's their job.
I'm not singling out the ACC. Yeah. I just don't like the politics of anybody fighting other than like your social media account posting on Twitter, here's why my team should make the playoff. Like, I don't like when Sark's going on podcasts trying to get Texas love. I don't like when Poggi is at the club getting the bottle girls to hold up the signs. It's like Vandy in the play. Yeah. Like, I don't like the politicking for any of this. Like, I'm a big proponent of win your damn games so that way you don't have to be a politician and get your team in there. So I get what he's saying in that regard. However, at the end of the day, the ACC financially benefits from having ACC teams in the college football playoff.
Yes.
Because you choose to actively be independent. Like, no one forces Notre Dame to be independent. They choose to be independent. And I get why they choose it, right? Like, selfishly, from Notre Dame point of view, they make way more money being independent than they do if they were to join a conference. However, what I would say is that you also pay the consequences of not being in a conference. Unfortunately, with the college football playoff, the way it worked out, you paid the consequence of not making it because of your schedule and the other reasons the committee gave, because Alabama went for a 4th and 2. And then you pay for the consequence that the ACC isn't going to back you up because they don't benefit from you making the playoff. Only you do. So I don't like that he's playing the victim card, saying like, woe is me. How are you going against us? We've done so much for you. Yeah, you have, but you actively choose to not join that conference. Therefore, like, they don't benefit from you making the playoff. They benefit from Miami making the playoff. You can't just want it your way and be. I feel like Pete wants it his way without jumping into the ACC's shoes and then seeing it from their point of view. Because I think if you go to the ACC's point of view, they also have a fair point. I see both sides. I think it's fair for him to be like, damn, we lost out. That's unfortunate. Here's why I think we should have made it. Move on. Sorry, I know I'm going long here. The last point I'll make,
no, you're
and then I'll hand it over to you. The other part that I don't like about it was in the Dan Patrick interview, he makes the comment, they did permanent damage, and kind of goes on a little note about how it was permanent. He then, in his press conference, he was asked directly about that quote, if it did permanent damage. He goes, no, I don't want to be dramatic. You know, we can always sit down. It's going to have to be at a later date, and maybe we'll come back. So he kind of like backtracked on it. And if you're going to make a statement that like this conference did permanent damage, that's a pretty big statement to make. I think you either need to stick with it or you need to like say, hey, I know I said that on Dan Patrick's show. I was heated. I didn't mean, like, you either have to like acknowledge that you gave a different answer earlier and like stick to that, or like, I don't know. He played both sides and played what was good to say in front of a camera, which is fine. But I wish he had stuck to his guns one way or the other.
Let me ask you this. If Notre Dame, and this might be like rhetorical, but feel free to respond. If Notre Dame were to have made the playoff, would they have shared their revenue from making the playoff and playing in those games with the ACC?
No, they wouldn't have, which is why he's not allowed to get mad at them for them not wanting him to make it.
So why is the ACC at fault and causing permanent damage for promoting their member institutions? You have an agreement with them. Here's a loose analogy. People always call like well, we're sponsored by Nike too. Oregon's not the only Nike school. And I always respond, no, there are schools that are sponsored by Nike. There is one Nike university. Like there's a difference. So in that same regard, you can have a partnership with the ACC. You are not an ACC institution, member institution, because you have chosen not to be. The ACC has extended the invite to you countless times, and you have chosen not to be Notre Dame. And for me, there's two parts of this. One part I like of what Pete Bevacqua said, and one part I don't. I don't like the fact that he's upset that the ACC is backing their member institutions. That is their job. I mean, I'll agree that I didn't like personally when the ACC tweeted out the reasons why Duke should be considered for the playoff because they won the conference title game, and they listed out like their accomplishments compared to MAC schools or group of 5 schools. And at that point I said, okay, this is stupid. But when you have a team on the bubble, and if Miami doesn't get in, the ACC won't get a single team in. Not only is that not financially beneficial, it's financially damaging not to get a team in the playoff, but also think about the repercussions through the long off season we're about to have. All these conference commissioners, all these presidents are going to be meeting about the next iteration of the playoff. If one of the power conferences doesn't have a team good enough to make the playoff, what leverage do they have to tell the Big Ten, hey, we don't like your AQI model? Zero leverage. Thank you. Zero leverage. Like, they don't have any leverage to tell the Big Ten that we don't like your AQI model that gives us 2 playoff teams versus your 4. Because 2 playoff teams, the Big Ten will respond, well, 2 playoff teams is 2 more than you had this year, ACC. So the ACC had to like recommend Miami to be in, had to promote that. They also had no obligation to promote Notre Dame to being in because, like you said, they don't get any financial benefit of Notre Dame being in. The part I agreed with Pete Bevacqua and Notre Dame, and the part that I sympathize with, I don't sympathize with any of these conversations, the permanent damage comment or just the opting out of a bowl game, which we'll get to in a few. I don't sympathize with that. The part that I sympathize with Notre Dame and Pete Bevacqua is the College Football Playoff Committee pulled the rug out from under them. They didn't leave them out of the playoff and put them on the bubble like Miami did. Miami was behind them the whole time. They didn't play a game last week, and Miami jumped them. And Hunter Yurachek, the Arkansas AD and the committee chair, was the guy that basically said, well, yeah, when it came down to it, we assessed head-to-head. So that just means the last 5 weeks you didn't assess head-to-head. That just means, like, that part I understand exactly where Notre Dame's coming from. You feel for them because they're like going into last week, they're like, okay, we're at 9 or 10. We're not high enough, but at least that's because of the games we've lost. At least we feel comfortable enough being ahead of the team that we feel threatened by jumping us because neither of us play this week. And the committee pulled the rug out from under them. If the committee had Miami over them, even if they were both out of the playoff and they jumped Miami in, if the committee had Miami at 9 and Notre Dame at 12, I don't think they would feel this level of anger and frustration. I think so. That's my whole spiel. Is on one hand, Notre Dame is kind of soft for a lot of things they're saying and just flat out wrong. But on the committee side, the actual playoff selection side, I sympathize with them on that because the committee fucked up and pulled the rug out from under them.
Yeah, it felt like they took, like, being the victim. They tried to see how far they could extend being the victim. Like, they were the victim in the fact that they had the rug pulled out from underneath them. That is true. Like, in terms of the way the committee handled the last 6 weeks and the way that they didn't get the playoff spot and the way it went down, you were the victim in that. Like, you got totally screwed. And it felt like they were like, okay, we have some sympathy. Let's see how far we can extend this. Let's try and trash the ACC on our way. Like, and I'm like, all right, I'm totally here with you when it comes to the playoff and the way that was handled. But let's stop now complaining about the ACC. And yeah, sure, the ACC tried to make a case of, here's why these teams should be in, and this is why Notre Dame football shouldn't be. And then he tried to pull in like, well, we're a member institution for 24 other programs at the ACC. Okay, they didn't trash those 24 programs. They didn't go on and throw some jab at Notre Dame women's basketball. It was football. I felt like they were just kind of like, okay, we have the people sympathize with us right now. Let's see how far we can take this. Like, pump the brakes. Let's stick to the college football playoff because that's where you got screwed. And I wish he had stopped there because I think this is a good. We obviously, I think most fans of college football agree that the current 12-team playoff model, the way it is today, is bad. And it's not the best version of what we could probably have. I wish he had just kind of pushed that agenda. The other thing I didn't really like was like starting to hype a thought, like just okay, well, we're going to do a 12 or 14 team playoff and we cut a deal with ESPN where now they're going to auto bid us a spot if we finish ranks 13 or better. Like what, like why are like that? I didn't like then he kind of threw out the idea of a 16 or more team playoff and they would just extend it. Then that was when I was like, okay, hold up, what are we doing here? So I feel like he just kind of took this one issue and then ran so far in so many directions with it. And it was just like, all right, I don't like the rest of what you're doing. I'm okay with this one thing, but stop before I really just now, like, you're being so annoying. I don't even want to agree with you on this one thing anymore, even though I know that deep down.
I mean, I don't even know if we want to even have the conversation about the bowl game or the 12. The fact that they have an agreement to guaranteed to make the 12-team playoff if they're ranked 12 or higher. There's 130 something FBS programs. One, if you're ranked 12 or higher, you're probably in the playoff. But Notre Dame probably needs it because they can't win a conference title game by not being in a conference. Two, I support your independence, but like you can't have it both ways, like you said. You got to choose it. You got to choose one avenue. I think it's kind of soft having doing that, and I think it's for the opting out of the bowl game part. I mentioned this to you off air. I was fine with like a team like Auburn doing it because Alex Golesh came out. He said, "Guys, we have a brand new coaching staff. Half the coaches on the old staff are gone. Half the players on the old team have transferred out or aren't here. It's the holidays. We're opting out of a bowl game because I don't know if we can field a team." Notre Dame, if on Sunday they made the playoff, they were selected to make the playoff. Their coaching staff's still here. The players are still here. They are ready to play a playoff game and a bowl game. They opted out of it. I think that's soft. I can't respect that because I think let me ask you this. I've heard arguments today of like, I empathize with Notre Dame because after getting the rug pulled out from under you, how could you go play a football game? Well, I would rather be like the Georgia team or that played. There was a really good example. That same year, the Florida State was shafted by the committee and was put at 5 because their Jordan Travis's injury. Georgia also got somewhat shafted by the committee. Neither of them made the 14 playoff. Florida State went into that bowl game with the attitude that Notre Dame is. Like, woe is me. I'm the victim. I should have been in the playoff. Georgia went into that bowl game like, no, let's fucking prove that we are one of the top 4 teams in the country. And Georgia steamrolled them. Granted, Florida State didn't have
out of them.
Yeah, they didn't have their Florida State didn't have their quarterback, but it doesn't matter. I respect teams more when they're like, okay, they're wrong. Let's go use that fuel to have 15 more practices, not only for my current guys, but for my young guys that I'm trying to develop and see who has a spot for next year. But also, let's go prove the country wrong and use that fuel for next season too. And Notre Dame could have done that. They could have come out, steamrolled whoever they probably could have played in the Tony the Tiger Bowl and taking it from there, but that didn't happen. I don't know. Like I hate bashing Notre Dame because on one hand, I completely agree that they should have we don't need to relitigate the whole playoff conversation. Yes, as a fan of a team who's in the playoff, I'm happy that they're not in because the matchups that those teams are facing might be a little easier than Notre Dame. But at least by the criteria that we have set, you didn't deserve to be in as much as other teams. And, there's more to litigate. We have a long off season to talk about the playoff. Another AD who made a fool of himself in the last couple of weeks. And we can make this somewhat quick before we get to the actual star of the segment. Penn State's Pat Kraft. Now, I can't remember a time when a public figure created a 180 in terms of public image in a span of 2 days faster than Pat Kraft did. Now, you and I feel differently than how Penn State fans feel about Pat Kraft right now. I've seen Penn State fans, after the leaked audio that came out, they're all celebrating him. They're all loving him. They're saying that's from the heart. Now, if for you at home, if you haven't heard the leaked audio. Pat Kraft was in a team meeting with like 9 or 10 football players, and all he did was just destroy and threat and smear every other program's name.
Even his former coach, even coaches that had just left the program, he was smearing them too.
And Oregon, like he said, Oregon's full of a bunch of fucking weirdos. That's his quote, not mine. He came out after during the introductory press conference for Matt Campbell, and he goes, "I apologize to anyone that I may have offended with the video that leaked. It was 9 or 10 football players that wanted to come in and sit down, and we had an open and honest discussion, but I fell short of the standard that I should represent for all those people, all my staff that sits up there, all 833 athletes that I represent. I can't apologize enough for those who I may have offended, and well, I got to be better." Look, my opinion on this before we get to Campbell, I think I texted it to you. You can't pretend you're one way in one setting and pretend you're another way in a public setting and choose and hope that I believe that that's who you are in the public setting, because we now have seen what you are in a private setting. Maybe it's because you want to seem cool to the kids. Maybe it's because you were just having an open and honest discussion. But the things that you were saying, maybe that's your true beliefs. But as a athletic director of a top tier Power 4 program, can you imagine Rob Mullins, a leaked audio of him coming out destroying like USC and Washington, even if they are the Oregon sport? Yeah. And this is also before Penn State hired a coach, and this was like through day 54 of a hiring cycle. So I don't love the fact that Pat Kraft is still the AD at Penn State, but he got his guy somehow. I don't know if you read the story. Penn State tried to reach out to Matt Campbell in October, and they reached out to the wrong Matt Campbell or the wrong person. So they just
heard that story. I don't buy it for a single second. That was to me like, the truth is Matt Campbell was coach number 34 on our list. We can't Pat Kraft, because it literally in the leaked audio, Pat Kraft admits multiple times that his ass is on the line. His ass is going to get fired if he doesn't make the right move. He won't let himself be the guy that ruined Penn State, because how stupid could you be if you fuck up Penn State? Like, his words. If he, like, there's no way on earth he's ever going to admit that Matt Campbell was like the 19th option and that they struck out on everybody else. So I think he was just totally making up some bullshit that was like, oh, we got the wrong. Who gets the wrong Matt? You're fucking Penn State, dude. You're the athletic director.
Yeah.
How are you getting the wrong damn Matt Campbell? Like, that's such, and if that's a real story, that's damn near more embarrassing. Like, so how stupid are you? Like,
that's what I think. I think that they actually contacted the wrong guy. I think that's more emblematic of the search, and they like just gave up on Matt Campbell at that point. Buddy, you were in the search 54 days later, and as it's been chronicled, like Matt Campbell kind of shuts off the noise during the season every year and doesn't want to address coaching stuff until after his last regular season game. That might be false. Maybe at home he does look at other potential opportunities, but at least what's been reported, what's been chronicled, and now through Campbell's actions, he didn't take a job until his last regular season game at Iowa State. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pat Kraft did contact the wrong Matt Campbell and then just gave up from there. Like that's just a ridiculous story. That the show was emblematic to how messy this search was. Now, I have a feeling we're going to disagree on how good the hire is for Penn State, but I'm going to set the ball up on a tee for you by saying this. I think Penn State stumbled, fell, and walked their ass backwards, fell on a bunch of glass, and somehow ended up with the right hire. Now, what do you think?
All right. I don't love this fit of Matt Campbell and Penn State. And the reason being, I think, and when I said this, I've been saying this the whole time. When you fire James Franklin, you fire him because you wanted to take the next step, which is premier, elite, year in, year out, national champions, raising a trophy, elite. James Franklin could get you almost all the way there, but he was never a good enough coach to take that next step. You fire him because you want that next step. That's totally fine. I respect the expectations. You feel like your program's in a spot that's a fair expectation. Matt Campbell, to me, seems like a coach who is kind of like James Franklin in the sense that
I'll buy that.
He's a good game manager. He's a good scheme coach, but he's never going to be innovative on offense or innovative on defense to the point where teams are trying to steal plays from him, trying to steal his looks. He doesn't really strike me as a guy who's going to out scheme Ryan Day and Dan Lanning and whoever Michigan ends up hiring, or Kurt Signetti. It doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to out coach them. He doesn't really strike me as a guy that's going to out recruit in the Big Ten. Penn State, I think, recruited as well as it did because of James Franklin. And I know this is true because Pat Kraft in his leaked audio said, who the fuck wants to come to, middle of nowhere, Happy Valley? We're in the middle of nowhere. It's hard to get people here. Matt Campbell is not an elite recruiter. He wasn't at Iowa State. All of his 3 stars or even a couple 4 stars that he got through his tenure there were all kids from Ames, Iowa, from throughout the state of Iowa. He's not going to get. He's not going to light up. Yeah, he's a good evaluator, but is a good evaluator got you to be consistently good, not great in the Big 12. A good evaluation of a Pennsylvania 3-star is not going to beat Oregon. It's not going to beat Ohio State. It's not going to beat Michigan. It's not going to beat Indiana. It's not going to beat USC. It's not going to beat Washington consistently. I just don't think Matt Campbell is the coach that takes them to that next elite level that Penn State wanted. If anything, I think he just continues to be a 8-4 on a window year will be 10-2 kind of coach. And Matt Campbell wasn't a home run hire to me. I also don't think he Pat Kraft and what Penn State we've just found out is they have this fiery energy where they just want to we just got to fucking win now. As he was going in that leaked audio, Matt Campbell is in his interview with Josh Pate was oh, I'm just so humble and so thankful. And I just want to be with my family. And that's great. He's a great guy. And I love that. That's very Iowa State in the Big 12. That is not, we got to fucking win a championship. We got to fucking win one now. That is not the energy that I see working. I don't see Pat Kraft guy who's going to come in and trash everybody under the sun that's not in the room with him and just be kind of a terrible human. I don't see that really boding well with Matt Campbell, who's kind of a good, seems more like a good guy. I want to do this the right way. They just don't seem compatible. And like I said, Matt Campbell isn't the guy that's going to go pull a bunch of 4 and 5 stars from the South and then go into Autzen Stadium and out scheme Dan Lanning. That's just not who Matt Campbell is. He's never been that.
All right. I see your point. I don't disagree with all of that. I also like the fact that we're disagreeing on something. I think based off of a lot of the things that he did at Iowa State, you can translate that at a higher level at Penn State. Iowa State was never supposed to be even a window program. Before Matt Campbell, they had I think you could count on one hand the amount of good years they had as a football program. And Matt Campbell didn't make them an elite program, but he made them what we always say is, he's going to recruit, he's going to evaluate, and he's going to bring in the guys that he thinks he can develop so then they can look at down the road 2 years, 3 years from now. That is our window. That's Iowa State football under Matt Campbell, and he did a hell of a job. He also, in his press conference, mentioned that Iowa State's resources were so lacking that they had to build, their GM had to build their own collective. They didn't have a collective built for them like a lot of other Power 4 programs. It's my opinion is, you're right, he could have a ceiling as a head coach, but I'm very interested to see what his evaluation process, what his development process, what his staffing with higher resources, with greater access to the best of the best players could look like at a Penn State. Now, I think also Matt Campbell's just one of the better humans to be a head football coach, so I root for the guy. Not that I know him, but from watching his journey for the last 10 years and his press conferences, interviews, not every coach is a good human. You want your coach to be a good human. I think Penn State found a good human. I think in general, look, I guess my question for you is, who would have been that hire for you at Penn State?
There's probably a list of any of the guys that said no to them. So that's 20 people I think would have been good hires. And then people that I don't even know the names of, but I'll keep going back to this example when Oregon went after Dan Lanning or when Notre Dame went after Marcus Freeman. Even there's got to be a handful of coaches that I think were worth the shot that are on that tier. that they probably could have gone after. And like I said, when you fire someone in October, you kind of expect you're doing that due diligence for the 54 days that this went on for. And my thing with Matt Campbell, the reason why you fired James Franklin when you did is to get ahead on the search and either find that gem that you think could be a gem, or it's to get the big name guy. You didn't find a gem. We kind of know who Matt Campbell is by now in his career. And I think Matt Campbell has a 55% win percentage at Iowa State. He only won double-digit games once. He only won 3 bowl games, one of them, his biggest one being the COVID year bowl game, where they were one of few teams to actually play a significant amount of games. He's a good coach and he's a good guy and you root for him, but he's not the hidden gem hire that you fire a coach early for, and he's not the home run hire that's going to come in and win a national championship. And I think he was fun. He only won, like I said, he won 9 games once, he won 11 games once. 8 games twice in 2017, 2018, and then every other year was 7 or less. He was doing that in the Big 12. Yes, he's going to have access to a little bit, to significantly more money, a little bit better recruiting pipelines, but like Penn State is not, you're not recruiting, like Penn State to me is not a destination program where like a 5-star is coming to Penn State because you're Penn State. That's part of it, obviously, but they also were committing to James Franklin, and we really know that that's true because now that James Franklin's at Virginia Tech, look at what happened to all of those commits. They all commit to James Franklin at Virginia Tech. They weren't committed to Virginia Tech, they were committing to James Franklin. I don't know if Matt Campbell is the type of recruiter, and he's never even really had to even try to recruit to the way that Penn State's going to want him to recruit. How does that go when all of a sudden Penn State's like, shit, this guy can't sign 4 and 5 stars. He can't close the deal. And we don't have the branding to bring him in. Like if Matt Campbell shows up to your house and then the next day Ryan Day shows up, from his Ohio State gear, and then the next day Kurt Signetti, and then the next day it's Dan Lanning. How many of those guys are going to be going to Matt Campbell in Penn State? I don't think too many.
Yeah,
it just worries me.
I agree.
It worries me.
I agree on that part. Here's what I'll say: I think he's an excellent head football coach, and I'm curious to see how his build at Iowa State with far fewer resources, far fewer staff, far fewer help can take that and translate that with a war chest of resources at Penn State. How can they turn their process at Iowa State into a machine at Penn State? Now, my concern, I have a twofold concern for this hire because I have no idea if it will work out. I'm just really curious and excited to see if it will. My concern in general, number one, you fired James Franklin. You fired a regular 9 to 11 game winner because you wanted better, like you mentioned. If Matt Campbell, if he does go out and sign 4 and 5 stars, like you're concerned, if he does go out and develop similar to how he did at Iowa State, but they're still never over the hump of beating the Oregons, the Ohio States, the Michigans, at what point do we have the conversation of is that Penn State's ceiling as a program, not necessarily their coach? And my other concern is, look, it's no secret Penn State's in a mini rebuild right now. Now, I trust that Campbell and his staff are like already working the phones diligently and rapidly to go get as much of a head start on the transfer portal that's going to open in January. But with that said, we don't know. With so many of Matt Campbell took over the job, and I think Penn State signed 2 guys on early National Signing Day. I'm sure they're going to go sign like 10 more guys by National Signing Day and take over the portal and bring in a ton of guys there. But they're not going to be ready-made to win 10 games, 11 games next year unless Campbell does just an unbelievable job bringing in guys, or he finds a way to get Rocco Beck to go with him to Penn State or whatever. My 2 concerns are, how does the program look at this if in 4 years they still haven't gotten over the hump and now they're looking in the mirror of, is this a Penn State issue? Is this an athletic department issue? What are we doing wrong? Not necessarily the football coach. And the second one is how college football is all about momentum. The second one is, if your momentum next year starts out so slow because you will have to be in a mini rebuild, how does that take the Matt Campbell train off the tracks a little bit going forward at Penn State?
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, and especially your first concern. There's a nugget in there that I like, And it's kind of, you were talking about what happens if it's not successful. Does that change the ceiling in which we view Penn State in? And I think the answer is like undoubtedly yes. That does change the way that we would see their ceiling. And I think part of me, to kind of like keep pushing this a little bit, part of me feels, so Indiana was a program that everybody, even Curt Cignetti has said himself, when he got there, he could feel the loser mentality within the building, that nobody really believed in their program. You turn a program like that, which is obviously way lower than the ceiling than Penn State, you turn that into a championship caliber program by hiring the gem, by finding the gem and hiring him, bringing him in. Curt Cignetti was that gem, and they found it, and they hired him, they brought him in, and now look at it. Matt Campbell, I can almost promise you, is not that gem. And I think for me, that's kind of why I'm like, why are we doing the James Franklin dance again? You just fired Matt Campbell. Why are we hiring Matt Campbell? Like, I purposefully said his name twice there. I really feel like you just kind of went lateral. So I think you're dead on with your first fear.
I think my only pushback on that take, and I said it to you in the past, is if you put the smartest people in the room at Penn State, I don't know if they could have found the gem. That's not a knock on the smartest people in the world. I don't know if that's a knock on Penn State. I think Indiana didn't know that Curt Cignetti was the gem that they hired. And then now that they found, we got a rocket ship ready to explode here, now there's even more expectations and resources, and he's become the gem. Marcus Freeman, you mentioned, he was on Brian Kelly's staff. He was the defensive coordinator. Notre Dame had a couple years at least to get to know the guy, and the players asked for, begged for his hiring, and they turned him from DC to interim head coach to head coach. Dan Lanning, yes, you're right. He was a gem. But I just personally believe if you're going out there looking for the Curt Cignettis, the Dan Lannings of the world, maybe there is one. Maybe Bob Chesney at UCLA is. I just listened to his press conference. It sounded great. I'm hopeful for UCLA going forward. Maybe Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas is the gem. Maybe Alex Golesh, even though I don't know if he would be considered a gem because he was very well known. Maybe he's the gem at Auburn. In general, I think my point is we don't know who a gem is until they're the gem. Until
that's the risk you have to take, right? That's the risk you have to take. Like when you fire a 10-2 guy, you have to be a gem.
How do we know that
Matt Campbell? Yeah. If Matt Campbell was a gem, we would know by now. He's been a Division I Power 4 coach for a decade. Like if he was a gem, we would know. Like none of these other guys we're talking about were head coaches at the Power 4 level beforehand. Like there was their first gig that they got that took them on to that next step. And I think you take I think the kind of my argument is you take that risk. You might hire a dud. You might hire a Billy Napier and you set your program back. But you might hire the gem, the guy that turns your program around. And when you fire James Franklin because he wasn't winning the championships, he wasn't doing enough to be at the top level, you got to take it. You either hire a guy that's already at that level, which they tried and they failed. Okay, well, if we can't get a guy that we know can take us there, then let's go take a shot on a guy that might have a chance to. To me, they did the really safe play. They did hey, we're always going to be better than 6 wins. Unfortunately, you'll probably never be better than 10. And I think that's why I'm like, what? You just fired the guy that you're bringing in is going to do exactly the thing that you just fired the previous guy for. And I just feel like you're just kind of setting Matt Campbell up to fail in the sense of your expectations and where he'll reside. Now, from Matt Campbell's perspective, you're going to get paid an unbelievable amount of money to coach football, and that's great. You know, I'll never consider that failing. But you got to take that risk, man. If you're firing James Franklin, you got to take that risk. If you want to win a national championship, you either need to hire a guy that you know can win one or hire a guy that could maybe potentially win one. I feel comfortable saying I know Matt Campbell will probably never.
I'm going to clip that. I'm not sure if he ever will, but I think we got to keep that on. I think overall we agree, but a lot of that is because of Penn State. I just think, like I said, I don't like the risk is worth it until you have hired the bad risk. Like the risk for Florida hiring the gem was worth it until you're in year 2 of Billy Napier and have to pay him $30 million to leave. The risk is worth it until you've made until you realize, shoot, man, should have just gone with the safe play. But you're absolutely right. You fire James Franklin to upgrade, and it's really hard to upgrade from the coach and the amount of success James Franklin was bringing into Penn State. And at this point, there's very few coaches you could have hired that would have felt like slam dunks, because for what it's worth, James Franklin won a lot of games there. James Franklin was very successful there. James Franklin has his flaws. We've made fun of him. We've joked about him. We have believed against him. Jace has been on the record, I have too, saying we're not James Franklin guys. But I'm kind of rooting for him at Virginia Tech right now. And I think a lot of that is, I want him to prove that, like, yeah, he's a really good program builder. He's a good coach. And I know my camera's gone blurry, but there's a very good chance that Penn State has hired a replacement of James Franklin in Matt Campbell, who is James Franklin. I will buy that argument from you, that they basically just took off the disguise, and if he takes off his costume, it's just James Franklin all over again. I'll buy that.
Like a Scooby-Doo.
I do think in terms of hopeful hires, this could have potential for going forward. And my last take is Pat Kraft, and whatever we think about him, he kept mentioning in his press conference that he wanted a partner in building the program, almost like throwing jabs at James Franklin, saying it was always James Franklin's program. Like it was like an insecure conversation. Pat Kraft was saying maybe it's becoming Pat Kraft's program and Matt Campbell's just along for the ride. But I don't know. I'm hopeful for it. I understand your concern. Let's quickly talk about some transfer portal guys, and then we'll wrap the show. So the transfer portal open. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, to your point, like, we're going to say a lot of names, and guess what program? It's like, to the credit of you and Penn State here, there's going to be what's normally a top-tier program with probably a lot of open starting spots.
A lot of money.
Switching over to the portal, you're going to hear us talk a lot about Penn State in terms of potential landing spots. That'll be a program. Absolutely. Yeah,
so I think the star-studded player that we know is in the portal is Sam Leavitt, the ASU quarterback. And I already mentioned it once, like, how long is Kenny going to deal with this song and dance every year with his, like, he finds players out of the portal or out of high school and who do really well, and then they end up entering the portal. How long is he going to play that song and dance? Well, Sam Leavitt entered the portal. Kenny said he's very happy for him. I'm not going to predict where he's going to go, but I think if I were to guess, and I know you have some places, what's it called, listed out on the dock. I think Indiana has proven to be, hey, you're a senior quarterback, you're a high-level program. Fernando Mendoza, Curtis Rourke, come here, we're going to elevate you even more. And Curtis Rourke, probably not an NFL quarterback from the beginning, but Fernando Mendoza was a really good and talented quarterback. I was a fan of him at Cal. But now that he's at Indiana and he's elevated the program, and the program's elevated his name, and he's probably going to be the first overall pick of the NFL draft. I think Sam Leavitt's first place is probably Indiana. That will probably come get him. The other one, and I really like what you wrote down, is Miami. Until Mario Cristobal proves that he can recruit and develop a quarterback. Remember, Justin Herbert wasn't his quarterback. Justin Herbert was on the team at Oregon. After that, it was Anthony Brown a transfer. Tyler Shuck, he tried. Tyler Shuck transferred. And then Anthony Brown stuck around. And now at Miami, he couldn't win with Tyler Van Dyke and the other kids that he had when he took over. He brings in Cam Ward, and now he brings in Carson Beck. So he hasn't developed his own quarterback in years. So let's see if Miami would probably be his place that would offer him a ton of money to go play there. Do you have any other thoughts?
You're spot on with both of those. I really like both those calls with Indiana and Miami. Miami also, you'll hear a bunch of times, like when we start talking about quarterbacks over the next few weeks and even today. I'll throw in like some fun ones. Florida State is a name that I heard a little bit with Sam Leavitt, just in terms of they're going to have a lot of money and they're going to be desperate to make a big splash. So that's a school that can offer him QB1 day one. They can offer him what I assume will be a nice NIL package. Another program that I could really see a transfer kid going to is LSU. Again, like Lane Kiffin kind of proved it, I think, with Trinidad, about his ability to But plus Lane Kiffin, just like throughout his career, has produced fantastic quarterbacks. But I think that's going to be a hotbed. And I think you make a good point with Miami and Mario Cristobal, because they have not developed like a young QB all the way through, but they've taken transfers in that they've, like Carson Beck, when his time ran out at Georgia, I mean, the country was out on that kid. And he's kind of revived himself this year, and he has a chance to do that here in the playoff. Cam Ward, obviously, we know what happened with Cam Ward and his story and where he's at now in the NFL. Lenore Sellers is a guy I tee it up to say Lenore Sellers, the QB. He has not entered the portal. There are rumors that could happen. Miami is a program I totally could see very similar to what you said with Sam Levitt. Like, come here, we'll let you cook. We'll let you cook for a year. You'll make the NFL. It'll be good. I don't really picture Lenore Sellers at Indiana the way I could see Sam Levitt, because Sam Levitt originally committed to Michigan State. So he's at least got some comfortability and familiarity with the Big Ten, cold weather, that kind of stuff. I think Lenore Sellers is from the South. I think he's from South Carolina. People say he'll kind of stick in the SEC. Miami, obviously not SEC, but territory-wise and vibe-wise, I feel like pretty adjacent. Another big name that came out somewhat recently.
One more thing on Levitt. I totally forgot. Sam Levitt was definitely recruited by Mario Cristobal out of high school, because Mario Cristobal was the Oregon coach. Sam Levitt's from Oregon, so they probably have an existing relationship. Yeah, so I would actually make Miami a pretty high level spot for Sam Levitt.
I feel like between Indiana and Miami, it's going to be one of those two for sure. And then I feel like Lenore Sellers, like if he's Indiana, Sellers is Miami kind of thing. Another name that entered that's a kind of a big name that a lot of people have heard is Nick Marsh, sophomore wide receiver out of Michigan State, 6'3", 210 pounds. He was a very high recruit out of high school. That's a guy that's, whenever he gets opportunities, he looks like an absolute beast. Unfortunately, with the way Michigan State football has been the last 2 years, those opportunities have been few and far in between, which is interesting because he's transferring because he feels like he's on a team where he just doesn't, he wants to be premier wide receiver one, getting the ball a lot. Totally fair. He wants to make the NFL. I get that. The two schools that I've heard a lot about for him potentially transferring would be Michigan and Penn State, two programs that don't really produce high-end production wide receivers. So I thought that was interesting. I was curious if you had any thoughts about those two schools, if they would be good fits for him, or maybe if you had any ideas of where a kid like him might be. He's from Michigan too, so that kind of sways it.
Let's see who Michigan gets, because they could probably, I would imagine, if the Michigan job could be any more attractive, is you have the opportunity, if you're a high-level offensive coach, to develop Bryce Underwood and potentially have the best quarterback in the country in a year or two, depending on how you develop them. And then if they hire a good offensive coach, Nick Marsh absolutely would be a top-tier candidate there. My commentary on, or feelings on where Nick Marsh would go is, I don't think it matters as much to these kids if they're going to a pass-first offense or a team that's developed a lot of wide receivers in the past. I think there is an alpha mentality, rightfully so, of some of these kids of like, it doesn't matter where I am. I'm going to be the number one guy. I just want to do it on a higher level and make a little bit more money for it, and more power to them. I think Penn State's definitely looking for pieces, and Penn State would be willing to pay a little bit more for a guy of his talent level. And Michigan probably would try to, I mean, the best thing for Michigan after all the scandals last couple of years is go out next year and be really damn good with whoever they hire.
Yeah.
Because winning absolves a lot of issues. And
yes,
sometimes
that's a great point.
It's always this quote, victors write the story, to the victors go the spoils. And if Michigan goes out and goes 11-1, 10-2, or maybe beats Ohio State or makes the playoff, it'd be like, man, look at this 180 Michigan made in a year. And sometimes a guy like Nick Marsh would be worth it, even if you don't have the history of developing the best wide receivers. Doesn't Michigan have a Marsh guy, or am I going crazy?
Yeah, they do. They have like Alex Marsh, he was a true freshman this year, so they could have double Marsh. Maybe they should go to Florida or something. Reason.
Okay, yeah, I was like,
you could also if you're gonna try to keep Bryce Underwood, you could say, hey Bryce, how about this Lamborghini that's 6'3", 210 that plays out wide? You know, that could also be a double whammy selling pitch for them. And also in a world where they get like Kalen DeBoer and then Bryce develops and they get Nick Marsh and they already have Alex Marsh, that would be hilarious to see a program go from like, we might throw the ball 6 times today to we are going to throw it 65 times today. And we might not have 200 rushing yards on the season, but we will be 12-0 because we're throwing for 450 a game. Would be an interesting turnaround there. Let me throw another big name at you. Kind of a forgotten superstar, CJ Baxter, running back out of Texas. He was the number 1 running back from the state of Florida. He was from Orlando in the 2023 class. He's like 6'1", a little over 200. He's a freak athlete, and he was amazing his freshman year. He was like a phenom. Everyone was like, oh yeah, this kid is like the next Texas superstar running back. And then in 2024 and 2025, he went through a handful of injuries that just kind of like derailed his career. Obviously, he's still young, so it's not like it ruined his career, but lost the starting job, then could never get healthy. And then when he played, he didn't look the same. There's been rumors that he's getting fully healthy, which is interesting because like a school like Penn State is going to lose Allen and Singleton. They're going to need a running back, and that's a big program that could use someone like him. But then there's people that said Alex Golesh is a really good choice. Recruited him when he was at Tennessee. Golesh was at Tennessee. Recruited Baxter, and he almost went to Tennessee. And then there's also been people say he could go back home and go to UCF and just try and like rebuild his career at UCF and just go crazy in the Big 12 and put up crazy stats. So he's kind of a fun name to see what happens. But Texas is losing 2 running backs that have already entered the portal.
I wonder how much of that is the unfortunate, ugly world of like when you ask these kids to be semi-employees, you're also going to be told to leave. And in the scholarship world, it was called processing, and it didn't happen as often, but like the biggest programs did. Right now, I wonder how many of it. Texas had a terrible year running the ball, and I know injuries happened with CJ Baxter, and I know Gibson was like. I wonder how much of that is Texas saying we're starting fresh in the running back room, or we're going to rethink our running backs. I think CJ Baxter could absolutely be a difference maker somewhere if he stays healthy. I mean, he was awesome before that. Lots of potential, had a pop. I wouldn't. If I'm Matt Campbell, I would give him a call, but I'm also going to be like, you're not going to be our bell cow because I can't rely on a guy who's had the injuries he's had to be our every down back. We're also going to go get guys for you to compete with and probably share the field with. And I mean, I think Penn State's a great play. I think people who listen to us will get annoyed that we'll probably be sharing the same like 4 programs about potential transfer portal destinations. But I think you have to understand, listener, that some of these programs are going to be attractive because there's a lot of spots open, like Penn State. Some of these programs are going to be really attractive because they have a potential superstar quarterback and they just need the right coach and the right receivers and skill talent around them. Michigan. Some of these programs are going to want like really good talent so they can expedite a rebuild. Auburn. All of that exists. So like we've talked about a couple of them. I think Lenore Sellers is the biggest. I mean, we haven't even talked about Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola's leaving.
Texas Tech.
Well, that would be hilarious. Dylan Raiola's gone. Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams, I don't think they've entered the portal, but let's see how Friday goes with next Friday goes with Alabama or Cam Coleman in general. There's a lot of guys that have hinted at potentially jumping the portal or maybe at least jumping the portal, trying to get more money at their current place. That's something to know about some of these stars we're saying. Jordan Seaton, Bryce Underwood, Dylan Raiola, Cam Coleman, Ryan Williams. None of them are in the portal, but there's a good shot that if they choose to be in the portal, they're not necessarily planning on leaving, but it's like trying to put up a strong face, trying to get a little bit more money out of their current institution. And before they say, never mind, I'm going back to Alabama. Never mind, I'm going back to Colorado.
Yeah, they're calling it the re-recruiting cycle. So now between now and the portal is these teams are re-recruiting. Basically exactly what you just said. Going to these kids and saying like, hey, here's what our future is going to look like. And what if I offer you an extra 6 figures onto that? You know, like you got to re-recruit your guys now, which is good for the athlete, right? It keeps you invested and keeps programs honest with you. And that might be a nice little like balancing act with how like overpowered, if you're like a video game person, overpowered the portal is.
That's one of the reasons I really appreciate a guy like Kenny Dillingham, because he has had a lot of guys on his team transfer out this year, and he did the same thing last year. He let them play in the bowl game, and he let them participate in bowl practices until they found their next home. And a lot of that was because, and his quote yesterday said, these guys aren't on the 2026 team. This is the 2025 team. They absolutely can still practice and play for us because this is their 2025 team. They can get their film. They can get their development. I'm not like Kenny's so open and honest with all of that. So I appreciate the coach that he is. All right. We've wrapped up a very big show. Michigan firing Sherrone Moore. Matt Campbell hire Pete Bevacqua, or however you say his name, at Notre Dame's AD. His rant. We've gone over some of the transfer portal kids. I mean, there's going to be more. The portal opens January 2nd, so there's plenty of time to get into all of this. Make sure you are staying tuned with us at Flag for Discussion on YouTube. Spell it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at Flag for Discussion. We are on TikTok at Flag4 Discussion and Twitter at F4 Discussion. Make sure you are joining our Twitter. Make sure you are joining our fantasy ESPN bracket challenge. The link for that is on Twitter. We also have a Bowl Mania challenge. Let's see how many people we can get into this. Totally free to sign up. No payout at the end. Who knows? Maybe if we get a ton of people and we can think of something. But that seems a little chaotic to figure out. But on that note, Jace, I'm sorry you didn't get the Penn State head coaching job. I'm rooting for you for Michigan. Yeah. On that note, thank you so much for everybody for listening. From myself, Farbod Merkazi, my lovely partner, Jace Hatfield. This has been Flagged for Discussion.